Hello everyone and welcome to SkillCapped. I'm Notorious Dub and today I'm going to be going over one of the most controversial maps in Valorant right now, where everyone seems to dodge it as soon as it comes up in their ranked queues. Icebox. And I'm going to be giving you everything you need to know to play Icebox like the pros, so you know the best agents, how to attack and defend each bomb site, and finally some overall playstyle tips to help you fit into the flow of Icebox and pick up a few more rounds by playing to the strength of the map. Now, before we get too deep into the strategies for Icebox, we have to know exactly who the best agents are for the map and why they perform better than others. And honestly, the Icebox meta doesn't even come close to following the rules of the rest of the game and the maps that we have so far. Now, starting off, the first agent that might surprise you getting a ton of play in high-level games is Viper. With her wall making B side pretty easy to play around on attacker side, snake bites to cut off one of the many funnels that the map forces players to walk through to get to the bomb sites, and very oppressive ult spots to log down bomb plants and give you easier retakes, give Viper enough utility and create opportunities for your team by getting rid of a lot of the aspects that make this map so difficult. And next up, it's worth noting that Sentinels are starting to take more of a backseat role on Icebox because there are just too many areas that enemies can come from that need to be locked down if you want to stop the enemies from taking control of an area. Too many that a single Sentinel honestly just can't handle. But even then, Killjoy is great for stopping the inevitable flanks that happen anytime your team doesn't have a Sentinel. And Cypher is still going to be picked a fair bit for his ability to get early information with his camera so you can play for early rotates just like always. But with both of these being somewhat interchangeable when teams decide to go for a Sentinel, we actually see Sage being a pretty high priority pick for Icebox because of her ability to wall off very important choke points, like the tube on the side of mid. With a vertical wall inside of the tube, Sage can make that area of the map virtually unplayable for the attacker team, who then has to rotate back out through mid, which can oftentimes be very risky. And with long walkways to get to the sites, getting stopped by a Sage wall or slows means that rotating off is often risky and a big investment of time. And from there, the meta starts to normalize a bit, with Omen being the go-to smoker because of his ability to abuse the verticality of the map and flash through the harsh choke points whenever your team's taking sites. And then we have Reyna, who is shaping up to be the best duelist on the map, because although there are a lot of angles to play around Reyna's flash and kind of work around it, it is very easy to create 1v1s for yourself, which is what Reyna excels at. And you can get multiple picks by herself in one round just because she can take a series of 1v1s and always be at full health afterwards. And then we have Jett. So Jett is turning out to be a very high tier pick because of all of the verticality. Now, operator angles are virtually everywhere you look on Icebox because you can get on top of so many different boxes. And you can find line of sight to the enemies from the second they lean towards a bomb site at all. And not to mention, all of the corners makes her smokes extra viable and her escape much more safe because she can get back behind that wall with one dash. The only other person that really stands out in contrast to the meta on the other maps is the play that Sova is getting. Surprisingly, Sova is really not being picked as much on Icebox as people initially expected, because the verticality makes his ultimate less effective, the lack of default and standardized plant locations makes shock dart lineups and his ultimate less effective again, and all of the corners take effectiveness out of his recon dart, which essentially guts his entire system, but his recon drone is still very good for getting your team onto site. But everyone else seems to be a bit of a mid-tier pick aside from these agents, with everyone being able to fill a pretty important role for their team, but not really doing that role as well as they could on other maps. And if you're serious about improving, then go to skillcapped.com to unlock our hyper improvement system that will teach you how to win more gunfights, master your agent, and so much more. Backed by our rank improvement guarantee, you have nothing to lose. So come join over 500,000 satisfied members of SkillCapped, improve that KDA, and get the rank you've always wanted at skillcapped.com. Link is in the description below. And with the agent meta taken care of, let's go over the basics of where you should be playing on each side of the map. Now, starting with defender side, we have an easy 2-1-2 setup, with 2 people locking down the A site and 2 people locking down the B site, and 1 person taking over the middle. But with this setup, it's honestly more about being able to help your teammates. B site has very long entranceways into the site, meaning one of the players on B can easily get information on approaching enemies by themselves and call for the other player leaning B to come all the way over, allowing for the mid player to then rotate to kitchen and the A player to then come over to cover mid. This allows your team to stack sites naturally, and the entire point of this setup is to play around mid control. Now with one person playing in mid and one of the B players playing the underpass beneath the tube or sneaking down the tube on occasion, the defending team can operate a very effective crossfire on mid playing around smokes, while still being very safe and able to fall back to more passive angles. A site, on the other hand, is a different beast. The attackers have vertical advantage from the beginning of the round with a peek from the high rafters in the back, and Raze and Jet have a ton of angles to fly into the site to and still be protected from danger while their team closes in on the site and flushes you out of your corners. But as a defender, you have to play crossfires, peek with your teammate if you want early fights, and play operator angles. Now by operator angles, I mean these cheeky spots like all the way in the back right of sight to see the enemy's head popping out as soon as they enter that area to come into sight, or close behind nest for a quick shot on anyone peeking rafters. These are operator angles because they're much more consistent and better to be held with an operator, but it's just a very safe place to play, going for a quick tap and trying to get a pick, and then falling off relatively safely with information that enemies are then approaching. And this is going to allow your team to rotate much faster than if you're playing safe on site without that information. So stick to those operator angles where you can get a quick one and done tap and get information, instead of sticking to those rifle angles where you have to kind of commit to a fight in a much more dangerous area where you could die much easier. But attacking on Icebox is where it gets to be a bit more difficult, so let's start with the default. Now with the default on Icebox, which seems to be less common than on most maps, you have two options. A 2-on-2 with two people going A, one person playing extremely passive mid, and two people playing B. Or you can also go for a 3-2 split, where you send 3 people mid to take full control and enter one of the bomb sites from that angle, while your teammates work the other side of that bomb site and you pinch the enemies. And then with the 2-on-2, both sides should be pressured, with the pairs playing to trade off of each other, and the one person mid is playing to either cut off rotations or just simply stop the enemies from rushing down mid. But the most important thing here is that the mid player gives their team time to work their angles, because dying mid, especially early, separates the team, exposes them to the flank, and almost certainly loses the round because your team is separated and has no control of the map anymore because their most vulnerable position is not being taken care of. But in all honesty, the default on Icebox isn't quite as strong as it is on a map like Haven. Instead, we're seeing way more splits and full pushes in high elo, like on B site. Now, B side on Icebox is a little difficult to play around because there are some very cheesy angles to deal with, so make sure to clear those for easy kills on those cheesy enemies. But to get a full understanding of what a B push should look like, let's break down a round from Hiko playing Icebox as Reyna. Hiko's team initially defaults with a 2-1-2 setup, but quickly shifts into a B push very shortly into the round. Now, as they begin to push B, we see the most important parts of the push begin to unfold. At first, we see the Jet posted up on a box with some verticality. This allows her to clear out those pesky corners that she wouldn't normally be able to clear, and it also gives her team the ability to peek at the exact same time as her, allowing them to play off of each other and trade extremely naturally. From there, the Phoenix starts to lead the way with his flashes, and Hiko and Jet simply just hold their angles. Now, one of the things that we've all come to terms with in Valorant is that if you don't fully clear an angle, the enemy is probably playing there. So while the Phoenix flashes out, your teammates have to be playing to hold the angles that are going to peek the entry fragger if they're playing there. This allows the Phoenix to clear the most important angles and the most dangerous angles on site, and as soon as he gets past those initial angles, the assault can begin. One by one, Hiko's team take their time walking onto site, clearing angle after angle, because Icebox has boxes inside of boxes that are inside of bigger boxes, which causes what seems like an endless amount of angles to clear. So take your time as you're clearing through the site. And a very important factor of playing B site is that you cannot be afraid of those long range engagements. Now, we all know that Hiko's built different and has some of the best aim in the entire game, but as an attacker on B site, even if you don't have the best aim, you should be looking for a teammate to play near and take those long range engagements. Because worst case scenario, you delay their push onto site, and the probability of you dying is much lower than if the enemies were close. So in this case, the enemy has a long way to go to actually approach the site, so you want to jiggle peek and at least pressure them into thinking that you're going to peek whenever they get caught in no man's land in the middle of that open area walking up. Now, obviously this round is a case of Hiko doing Hiko things, but playing like this should be the standard way of taking the B-bomb site. The B-bomb site was very easy to take because he and his teammates played together, walked up, took their time, and cleared the site. And the only thing the enemy team could have done to prevent this is to get that early safe information that we talked about earlier to pull the rotations and challenge them on the entry to site. And then we have A-Site, which plays much differently. Now, A-Site's entrance for attackers has 4 different levels of verticality to peek from, and a ton of angles to work through and peek around, which gives all 5 players on your team a good angle to actually work with. And with 5 players actively peeking different angles, defending A-Site with 2 people gets very difficult. But with Jet and Omen providing so much mobility for the attacking team to play around, A-Site can quickly be overrun. The most common way we see this is with 2 people going up and peeking the rafters up top, clearing out the most obvious angles, and then dropping down onto the scaffold below. At least one person should be climbing the scaffold right across from there, and the rest are playing in nest, dashing in, or walking the ground level to clear out all of those extra angles. Now, this massive amount of pressure allows the attacking team to fight all at the same time and simultaneously, and a bomb site that is usually segmented and easy to get 1v1s on becomes very difficult to find a 1v1 for the defenders because there are so many attackers peeking at the exact same time. If you are a defender though, as I talked about slightly before, the best way to defend this is to play operator angles, where you can see this coming early, and only then can you and your teammate decide if you want to lock down a certain area of site, or just drop back and play for retake, which is usually going to be the best case because this map is so easy to rotate on for the defending team. Alright, and now that the basics are out of the way and you have a good understanding of what you should be doing round to round, there's one thing that we have to go over, and that's being aggressive on defense. This is one thing that I'm seeing kill a ton of games on defender side Icebox because it doesn't really work like other maps. So let's talk about pushing mid as a defender. Now, I see this far too often in my Icebox games, and the problem here is that the walkways to get onto the sites are very long. So a push down mid adds on to that walking distance and almost guarantees that you're not going to be there to help your team on the initial push to stop the enemies from getting onto site. Before defenders, the standard rotation is very quick and very efficient, meaning that if you hadn't walked around for that deep flank, you could have just rotated safely, backed up your teammates, played a crossfire, or just played to trade one of them out and stopped the enemies, or at least try to stop the enemies from taking the bomb site with your team. Which means that the majority of rounds, you should just be looking to safe rotate quickly to help support your team whenever the enemies are rushing those bomb sites. You should really only be pushing down mid as a defender if you get the pick on the mid guy, or if the enemy sentinel dies early in the round and you want to take advantage of the fact that the utility that they would have holding the mid push is now disabled. Now, obviously, pushing down mid is going to be an effective mix-up every once in a while, but with how safe and effective the rotation paths are, it's usually going to be better on most rounds to just rotate safely and back up your team. And one of the most difficult parts about playing Icebox is the sheer amount of angles that you have to check, which usually just gives a disadvantage to the person who's pushing the area. So in reality, you should be looking to take advantage of the areas that you already control and play unpredictable angles from there, instead of going for aggressive plays where you can be the person that's potentially going to be caught off guard. And remember, if you want to improve, win more gunfights, and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com. Link is in the description below. And with all of that being said, I think the community is starting to change their ways about Icebox being the most hated map in Valorant right now. But what do you think about Icebox? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, let me know what you want to see from us next. And as always, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching and spending this little bit of your day with us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn those notification bells on before you go. And I'm Notorious Dub, signing off.